Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Breeze. Breezeway Productions, The Breeze, where we bring you the latest in film and television films that are currently going around the film festival circuit. But today, we have a very special treat with an author that will be joining us, a New York Times best-selling author, Scott Eyman, with his new book that just came out, 20th Century Fox, the Darryl F. Zanuck, and the creation of the modern film studio. How are you, Scott?
I'm doing very well.
Right on. Thanks for coming on the show and tell us a little bit about your book, 20th Century Fox.
Well, it's a book I've been wanting to write for a long time, and the pandemic gave me the opportunity. I've been collecting string on Daryl Zanuck for 30 years, 35 years. Interviewed his son, Richard Zanuck, who was a huge producer in his own right. Richard did Jaws, The Sting, a lot of other fine pictures. And he was his father's son, but he wasn't his father's son. Daryl was a hard driving, hard charging guy. Richard was the same, but not the same. He was more elegant. He was smoother. He was educated. You know, Daryl barely got out of high school. He got out of high school, but that was it as far as he was concerned. After that, he went to the School of Hard Knocks and got into the movie business, which enchanted him from the first two-reeler he saw in Wahoo, Nebraska, which was where he was born. So it was a story that I'd always wanted to tell because I think Zanuck was at the very top of the heap of innovative and creative movie producers in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s.
Right. How did you start doing your research for this, and how did you get in contact with the family to dive into the archives? Did you reach out to them personally? Did you have people like work together to get that to you, or how did that come about?
Well, his children are all dead. I had interviewed Richard twice, once in the 70s, once in the 80s. And I had my transcripts of that, a lot of interviews, among others. Keenan Wynn's ex-wife, who was one of Tyrone Power's. So you put all these pieces together that out of the file folders that had been sitting there for decades. And you put a book together along with the narrative, the pre-existing narrative. And luckily I have friends who, because the libraries were all closed, but I was fascinated by Zanuck's story conference notes. And he had a stenographer attend every story conference and take down make a transcript of everything he said. So in case anybody disagreed, he could go right back and said, remember in the story conference on page 6, this is what I said, and you didn't do it. Why didn't you do it? So he was very explicit, and he basically was the George Patton of movie producers. He knew exactly what he wanted, and he intended to get it. And everybody on the Fox lot understood that because there was only one clear line of power at 20th Century Fox, and everything emanated from Daryl Zanuck's office. There was not any competition, any competing voices to be heard. People were out to make Daryl happy.
Yeah. When we talk about him, or as we read about it, you would consider him a mogul of sorts. And the way that he held down things was a very strong emperor-like view on it. Was he always that way, or did he rise into that and it became more powerful and crazy as he got more successful? What do you think? The internet connection is unstable.
No, I think he was that way in vitro, actually. I think he was probably kicking in his mother's womb. He was an alpha male when he was a teenager in Nebraska, and he was an alpha male when he was a busted would-be fiction writer in Los Angeles in the early 20s. And he was an alpha male making two-reel comedies, and he was an alpha male when he was running 20th Century Fox. That's just who he was. That was his personality. His wife didn't want to marry him at first because he was relentless, and he wouldn't take no for an answer. And she told her mother, his future mother-in-law, that she just found him exhausting. And it was her mother who told her, marry him, he's a genius, And he probably was, of a rough-hewn sort. He probably was a genius. Because if you look at where he started and if you look at where he finished, he didn't do badly at all. And he made hundreds of really good movies and several dozen that are masterpieces.
Yeah. It didn't start with just Daryl Zanuck. So how did Fox originally begin in the earliest days of Fox, right?
Fox was founded by a man whose name was Wilhelm Fuchs, who anglicized it to Fox. He came to America as a child. Like most of the founding generation of moguls, he was an Eastern European Jew. And he got into the theater business. Who co-founded Paramount Pictures, the company that became Paramount Pictures.
Mhm.
Fox and Zucker were both essentially real estate guys. They were not actually movie guys. They were focused on building a real estate empire. They got into production as a means of supplying reliable product to their theaters.
Mhm.
And both Fox and Zucker had to have somebody in Los Angeles actually running production, because neither of them wanted to be in Los Angeles unless it was absolutely necessary. They were New York guys, and they stayed in New York, and they came to LA under duress. So Fox was founded in 1915 by William Fox. It grew and grew and grew. The theater chain became enormous. But Fox didn't get ambitious until the middle 1920s. For the first 10 years of the corporation, he's kind of grinding out sausages and what we would call B pictures or exploitation pictures.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until the middle 20s that he started to get ambitious, and he wanted personal publicity, and he wanted to get the critics on his side, because the critics had never been on his side. And that began, and he hired some good people to run production, and he brought F.W. Murnau over from Germany, because he thought Murnau was the greatest director in the world, and he was probably right, and gave him carte blanche to make Sunrise, which indeed got a Special Academy Award the first year of the Oscars. So he was basically very forward thinking in terms of spreading the gospel of William Fox. Unfortunately, it all came crashing down because Fox overextended himself financially. He bought Lowe's Incorporated because he wanted to corner the American movie industry. He bought Lowe's Incorporated. He bought numerous theater chains in Europe. And then the stock market crashed in October of 1929. And all these companies that he had paid premium prices for were suddenly worth far less than the notes he was carrying. And there was a slow motion collapse of the Fox empire, basically just bad luck. The timing was awful. If he bought the stuff 3 years earlier, he could have ridden it out. But because he was purchasing all these companies in 27, 28, and then in 1929, the stock market crashed, he was just overwhelmed with debt, and the company crashed. And there are 5 years of drifting between 1930, when Fox leaves the company, and 1935, when Zanuck took it over, and it became 20th Century Fox, because Zanuck's independent company was 20th Century Pictures. So he merged his company with Fox, and it was ridiculous on the face of it, because Fox had a huge lot, the same lot they have on Pico. They had a film library, they had a lot of theaters, they had a big distribution network, and 20th Century Fox didn't even have a lot. I mean, 20th Century did not have a lot. They had made about 15 movies. They were all mostly successful, but they didn't have the infrastructure that he needed if he was going to expand. By segueing into Fox, he got the infrastructure of a massive studio. And that's what made it possible for him to go to the next level.
Wow, that was a very thorough and intricate timeline of breakdown from beginning to hardships and to the end, where we now know 20th Century Fox was bought by Disney, and that was really closing the book on Fox, which I think the whole industry was absolutely just astonished by, but that is now where we are. And so 20th Century Fox, Darryl F. Zanuck, and the creation of the modern film studio is available for readers that are interested in learning about the history of 20th Century Fox and Darryl Zanuck. So what would you say readers can look forward to while they dive into this book? What is something that would be very gripping to them as they go and take a look at this piece of work?
It's how we got from then till now. It'll complete the picture that they know from before Star Wars, which is when most people pick up the story. Most modern people pick up the story 20th Century Fox. And George Lucas reinvigorating the studio with the original Star Wars trilogy, and then depressing the studio with the second Star Wars trilogy. But it's the story of how Fox got to be a huge behemoth studio, and how it almost stopped being a huge behemoth studio and then recovered, and then ends up getting gutted by Disney and lock, stock, and barrel, which would have astonished Zanuck. Not because Zanuck understood that corporations get old and senile just like people do, but he would have been astonished that it was Disney doing it. He would have been astonished that it was Disney, because when Zanuck was at his prime in the 40s and 50s, Disney was a boutique studio. They were no threat to Zanuck or Paramount. You know, they made animated shorts. They made an animated feature every 3 years or 4 years, and they made 3 or 4 features a year, live action. Well, what's that? Have a nice time, Walt. You know, enjoy your little mom and pop grocery over there. The fact that Disney has become a monolith, a behemoth, a monolith, whatever word you care to describe, would have really surprised him. On the other hand, he would have said, good on you, because Disney became what Fox was.
Yeah, what a hell of a deal. Disney is a monster. It's just gobbling up things left and right, from Marvel and ESPN, and Nat Geo is on Disney Plus. And
it's forcing everybody else to gobble up whatever they can get, like Amazon buying out UA, for instance, you know, the UA library to get product for Amazon Prime, so they don't have to rent it from everybody else. And also there's a lot of stuff that can get remade and reinvigorated in the UA library, you know?
Yeah.
But that's that, because UA is what they do, 1 picture a year, 2 pictures a year. They're basically a moribund, you know, convenience operation, possibly a tax dodge, but we won't go into that. But you know, as they're not really competitive, they can't be competitive in terms of Paramount or Disney or any of the other majors. They can't even compete with Netflix, for God's sake. But it made sense to take that to ingest that library in the same way that Disney ingested Fox.
Yeah, the business continues to change. New companies are rising and taking over one left and right. So that's what's currently happening and where we see the future of the business. But if you want to take a trip down memory lane and understand what 20th Century Fox was about, you can definitely check out this book, which is available now. We will have a link available also in the comments, so you can go and then purchase it directly from Amazon. So I want to thank you, Scott, for joining me today to talk about your new book, and we hope that our audience can go and check out 20th Century Fox, Darryl F. Zanuck, and the creation of the modern film studio. Thanks for watching The Breeze, and we'll see you on next video.
Thank you.